in Egypt. Got with me here Abdullah al-Arian, assistant professor with the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University, joining us on the set. Let's talk about the supposed separation of powers in Egypt. The judiciary is supposed to be on one side, the government independently on the other side, but what are we seeing here? The hand of a military government influencing the judiciary, do you think?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of intersecting interests within these institutions of the state, and we're seeing this specifically in the aftermath of the overthrow of the Mubarak regime, that a number of the old state institutions have all more or less been working in their own capacity to try as much as possible to revert back to the policies of old. The judiciary, of course, is the same one that continuously stifled all attempts to revolutionize the Egyptian political process and the political system throughout the months and years after 2011's overthrow of Mubarak. And the military, of course, now is overseeing this exact same process, and so these sentences should not be seen as independent of that process.
This same judge, because it is the same person in both cases, both mass trials, has now handed down over 1,200 death sentences. Do you think the intention is, because how many people have been executed in Egypt in the last 5 years? I think it's 5 or 6. Is simply intended as a warning rather than as the possibility still exists it could be carried out, but is it unlikely?
Well, I think it's meant to send a message, certainly, that any kind of opposition, any kind of dissent will not be tolerated by the incoming military regime of Abdullah al-Sisi, as he kind of lays claim to political power within Egypt at this time, especially with the upcoming coronation of him to the presidency without any kind of contestation, without any kind of free and independent electoral process. But having said that, I think there also is the danger that they will be carrying out some of these death sentences, regardless of whether it's in the hundreds or even in the dozens. I mean, we're still talking about a situation of repression now in which 23,000 Egyptians have all been arrested and detained. In addition to these sentences, which get obviously most of the headlines, we still have hundreds and hundreds of other trials that end in very massively long prison sentences, people who are never even seeing their day in court months and months after their arrest, people, of course, who are being tortured, and not to mention
and
those
indeed
that are
many
still...
of these people, although we've got 683, we're told that only 50 of them are actually in custody. But I want to get on to something else, which in many ways I think is more, there's more, you can see the situation in Egypt more clearly with this ruling that's come out of a court today. The April the 6th movement, it supported the overthrow of Mohamed Morsi. Yeah, therefore you might think that the current regime would want it on its side in a sense. That too has been banned.
Right, and I think, again, this speaks to the idea that whatever happened on the 30th of June of last year was certainly not a revolution, it was a counter-revolution. And unfortunately, it was one that was supported by a number of elements from within the revolutionary youth movement, from within liberal individuals, political organizations, and activists across Egypt, many of whom were quite short-sighted in their attempts to overthrow the Muslim Brotherhood, not recognizing that by overthrowing the only democratically elected president that Egypt has ever had, in spite of all the shortcomings, in spite of all the failures of the Muslim Brotherhood, that this was still taking Egypt backwards in terms of its revolutionary process, that certainly now the counter-revolution is on the verge of being completed.
Mohamed Badia, leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, one of those given the death sentence today. If there's anybody who's likely to be executed, do you think they will choose him to make an example of the leader of the MB?
Well, I think that they've certainly taken a very total war approach to the Muslim Brotherhood by completely banning the organization, arresting its leaders, killing many of its members and supporters in the streets of Egypt, arresting them by the thousands, dismantling all of their institutions and organizations and their media. I certainly don't see it beyond Sisi to have Badia executed, because I think this is very much in keeping with his idea that this is a terrorist organization, not part of Egyptian civil society, as we've seen, not part of the very fabric of Egyptian society. And of course, many other Egyptian presidents have attempted in the past to ban this organization, and they've all done it with spectacular failure.
Appreciate your thoughts, your analysis, Abdullah al-Arian from Georgetown University.